Mm. I just love coffee so much. All right, so today I'm going to tell you the story of why my finger doesn't bend. A few people have noticed it in videos. It's nothing that I'm ashamed of. It's an accident that happened. September 2007, I was at work. I'm not going to go into too many details, only because there are people's reputations at stake. So I'm not going to say too much, but you'll get the general idea of what happened. So September 2007, I was at work. I work in the medical field. And it happened to be the first day of my daughter's 8th grade. And I had a plan every year, up until that year and beyond. Every year, the first day of school, her schools always invited parents to go and have lunch with the kids on the first day of school. So I was going. That was my plan. So I was at work. It was late morning and something happened. I had a little accident. Someone was a bit careless with a piece of equipment, and I was the next person to reach for that piece of equipment, and I got cut in the hand. I got cut in this palm right there. So what you see here for scars, I don't know how well it's showing up. What you see here from scar, which goes from the fingertip all the way down into my wrist, and there are a couple on my forearm here, a couple small scars also. All of that is surgical scar from repair. So the piece of equipment happened, the accident happened here, and the injury caused the two tendons. Each finger has two tendons that kind of glide against each other that enable you to pull down and pull back. You know, pull down, pull back, pull down, pull back. The ones on the back of the hand are responsible for the pull back. The ones on the front of the hand are responsible for the pull down. One of the tendons is responsible for this motion. The other tendon is responsible for this motion. Does that make sense? It's a quick little anatomy lesson. So anyway, both of the tendons that go to this finger were cut right there, immediately resulting in this action. So when it happened, I was like, look at that. That finger won't bend now. Oops. So I spent a few minutes tending to my wound, and then I was sent to employee health. A hand surgeon was called in immediately, and he said, this actually needs surgery right away. And I was a little bit flabbergasted because I thought, I'd probably just maybe, I don't know what I thought, but I didn't think surgery would be necessary. So I said, okay, well, hold please, because I've got to go to my daughter's school. And he's like, you've got a pretty severe injury here. I don't think you should go anywhere. And I said, well, listen, I'm not letting down my kid. I said I'd go to her school. That's where I'm going. Put a Band-Aid on it. I'll be back, I promise. So I did. I got a Band-Aid on it, ran to school, and my daughter was so cute. Mommy, what happened to your hand? And I said, oh, I just got a little boo-boo. No big deal. It's okay. How's your day going? And to this day, she's 22 now. To this day, she's still a little bit grumpy with me for not really exactly telling her the truth about my hand, but she didn't need that on the first day of school. Anyway, so then I went back to employee health after that, and I was like, all right, what are we going to do? So the surgeon said, we're going to do surgery tomorrow. He canceled his day so I knew working in the medical field, if someone cancels their day, especially a surgeon, for someone else, someone else needs it. It's a pretty big deal. It's pretty important. So I was like, all right then. So I left work, went and told my husband, and I said, I got this little boo-boo here, and this is what happened, and I have to have surgery tomorrow. And my husband was like, he kind of is a little bit of a worrier. And at this point, I still was blowing off the, severity of it. I figured we'll just do a little something, a little procedure, and it'll be back to normal in no time, and I'll be back to work in no time. At the time, I had a job that I absolutely loved. I loved what I did. I loved going to work every day. I just wanted to do that job every day. And I'm not going to say what I did because that'll just give too much away, and that's kind of personal anyway. But anyway, so the next day I had my surgery, and that repair was probably went from about here to here. It wasn't quite the length of my palm. None of the finger was involved at the time, or that scar wasn't involved yet. So it was probably from my finger to my thumb was probably the length of that first scar. So he kind of opened it up zigzag style, Harry Potter scar style. They kind of open these flaps, hold them open with retractors. Sorry if this makes you sick. And that way they get good visualization of the two tendons and they can repair them. So that's what I had. That's why the scar kind of goes, I don't know if you can really see, it's so well healed now. It kind of goes down here, that way, that way, that way, and then down again. Can you see? It's so hard. Anyway, so that repair happened. That was fine. That was in September of 2007. After that, I went to physical therapy, occupational therapy, pretty much every day. The first few weeks, every day, for dressing changes and exercise and wound care and strengthening and, you know, working that tendon. The important part in the beginning when you have tendon surgery is to make sure the tendon does not scar down. So, you know, there wasn't too much aggressive exercise in the beginning, but just a lot of like gentle, just keeping motion in the repair. When they first repair the tendon, they do it in a way that makes your finger kind of like that. They repair it a little bit tighter than it would be, so that, because the thought is that tendons are very stretchy, like elastic. So the thought is that it's easier to repair it tight and have you stretch it out than to have it already, you know, stretched out. Does that make sense? So they just repair it tighter than it needs to be, thinking that that tendon will stretch out. That didn't happen in my case. I found out at that time that I'm a pretty bad scar maker. I've got this scar on my forehead, which is pretty bad, but I mean, that was a pretty violent kind of thing. I smashed into a corner of a wall, perfect corner, when I was about 4 years old. I was doing that thing where you put your arms out and spin around, see how I can spin around inside the house. Brilliant. Head first, right into a sharp corner in the hallway in my parents' house. Blood everywhere. Had some bunch of stitches put in my head. I had a subdural hematoma. It was pretty bad. The scar goes pretty high up, and days after, I bashed my head again, like on a flat surface, and had to have the whole thing restitched. So, I mean, that's a pretty bad scar, but it's because it was a pretty bad injury. And I injured it twice within a few days. Look at all that gray hair. Gray hair, don't care. Anyway, I mean, that's a bad scar, but I thought it was because it was a bad injury. I also have a pretty nasty C-section scar. It's not terrible. It's normal, average size, but when I really feel it, it's super ropey. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It's not just like a flat scar. There's some bulk under it. So anyway, this over the course of between September, October, and November, this kind of action here scarred down. So I couldn't pull it out of it no matter what. The scar here the skin was tacked down to the tendon all the way down. The whole scar, skin to tendon. The tendons should be in their own sheath under the skin, and they should glide like this. Instead, they were like stuck together. Not only stuck together, they were stuck together inside their sheath and stuck to the skin. Everything was stuck. And even though I went to therapy every day and they did all these different modalities to try to keep that from happening, it happened. So in December, I went back under the knife and my surgeon did what's called a tenolysis, and that's where they just try to separate out all that scar. So again, opening up that same section, tried to reduce that scar. That was December. January, February, March, April, May, June. So now we gave it 6 months of intense therapy with even more modalities. One, you know, I had this stuff that looked like the rubber husband jar openers, and that was like used friction to make friction on my skin to keep the skin separated from the sheath and separated from the tendon. And I had big vibrator thing I had to hold on to that would like jiggle it and keep it from getting attached. This skin was just worked and worked and worked by an entire team of therapists. It was crazy how much work we did to try to keep that from scarring down. And as you can probably predict, by June, it was scarred down again. So now in June, I had another tenolysis, and I was like, is it just going to do the same thing? Now I've had a tendon repair and a tenolysis, so I want another tenolysis. What are the options? There really aren't any. I can live with it the way it is, but the way it is, I can't work, and I really want to go back to my job. So he told me that because we only waited 3 months the first time, that maybe waiting 6 months would be better, because the scar, I mean, scars truly take about a year to truly form and be what they are. I didn't really want to wait a full year to see what the scar was going to end up being like. I really wanted to get back to work sooner than that. So he said, instead of just waiting the 3 months, we'll wait, you know, now that it's been 6 months, the outcome should be better because we're halfway to what that scar would actually be. Let's get it now. Fine. So we did another tenolysis in June, like I said. After that, it didn't scar down again, but, you know, being with the repair and 2 tenolysis, 3 procedures in, the more you cut something, the more it's going to scar. So while it didn't scar down to, you know, the tendon and the sheath and the skin didn't scar down to it, put it that way. The skin stayed separate this time, but the 2 tendons inside the sheath were just mess. It was like mushy spaghetti. It wasn't, they weren't gliding freely. They weren't gliding at all. They were just, inside that sheath was just a wreck. I was back to this straight finger that still wouldn't bend. And as you can see, I have some bend there now. At that time, I didn't. So I was back to that straight finger. All fingers were straight. This finger wouldn't bend. So after that, within a few months, I started having problems with my shoulder. Between being splinted and casted so many times, and when you have your arm in a splint and a cast and you're wearing it in front of you, it causes a sort of odd, unnatural shoulder rotation. So between that and, you know, just all the working of this arm, I started having a rotten shoulder. So my hand surgeon is not just a hand surgeon, he's an upper extremity surgeon. He's an orthopedic surgeon, but he specializes in hands and shoulders. I went to him and I said, you know, I don't know, I really want to do this therapy you have me doing, but my shoulder's really killing me lately. I can't even reach my arm across the table comfortably for my therapy anymore. It's really, really bad. So he ordered an MRI. So MRI showed that I had developed a shoulder impingement syndrome. And impingement is when the tendons are kind of pinched and squeezed within the rotator cuff. So in my case, there were burrs of bone, kind of spurs of bone that were kind of digging into the tendon, not allowing it to glide freely. And, you know, one of the sure signs of impingement syndrome is when you can't pull your arm away from your body without a huge amount of pain. Oh, I just couldn't even do it. It hurt so much. I could like put my finger, I felt like if I could stick my finger in that joint, I could touch where it hurt. So impingement syndrome, guess what? More surgery. For that, they do what is called a decompression arthroscopy. So they just go in. I have 3 ports, 1, 2, 3, where he put his little instruments in and kind of scraped away at that bone and made a nice little passageway for those tendons to glide freely. Guess what? That was completely successful. No problems with that. I couldn't get in for that surgery for a few months, and I had to give it a bunch of months after for healing. That one was pretty damn hard. You kind of take for granted how much your shoulders are like, you think oh, well, when I recover, I can just sit in a chair and I won't move. No, every cough, every sneeze, you feel it in your shoulders. It's ridiculous how much it hurt. But that, you know, I had good pain control meds, and yeah, I had an ice machine that was strapped around my shoulder. So the ice machine was like the best thing ever. It was better than the Narcs. So I recovered from that. And after a few months, I was able to get back to my hand therapy, and we did a bunch of that. Weeks and weeks and weeks, probably months, and it still just wasn't getting any better. So I, went back to my doc, and I'm like, is there anything else we can do? Because as it is now, I can't do my job. And, I was too young. This 2007 was when it happened. This was, a year or two later. So I was probably like right around 40. I was way too young to be I don't want to be disabled. I wanted to work. I wanted to get back to my job that I loved. So he said, well, there is this other thing we can do. And I kind of felt like, how many things are we going to do? But I also kind of felt like if there's any little thing we can try, I've got to try it. So he described to me this 2-part procedure. So I was like, ugh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come on. So he described to me this 2-part procedure. The 2 parts would have to be done 6 months apart. The first part would be to take out everything. And that's where this fingertip into the palm scar comes from. Open it all up. Same thing. It's kind of got that, I don't know if you can see, it goes that way, then that way. So zigzag. Open the whole thing up. He was really good about this part. He went over the same part that he had already opened twice. Thank you. So open it up from here all the way down to here, which I have a hard time touching the wrist part above where my finger is. It still makes me nauseous. I know, it's a crazy thing. It's so sensitive. I just can't touch it. It's so old, but it's little. So anyway, clear out all the old tendon. Get rid of all that, the old tendons, the old sheath, all the scarring, get it all out of there. And what got put in was a silicone spacer called a Hunter rod. So it was a silicone rod that went from the fingertip to about middle of this scar. Silicone flexible rod. The idea was, since I'm such a good scar maker, we'd place this rod in there, and the scar that would form all around this rod would become the new sheath that a tendon needs to live within. So we would make a sheath out of my own scar material, let my own body scar up and form a sheath around this silicone rod. Then, after 6 months, the rod would be pulled, and we would take donor tendon, which is what these 2 little scars are. The donor tendon went from there to there. If you can touch your thumb to your pinky and make this tendon stick out, then you have the extra tendon that doesn't really do much. If you can't make that stick out, you don't have it. Not everybody has it. I don't know what it is. It's like a tail. Maybe we evolved out of needing it or whatever. But thankfully, I had it. So I was able to use my own tendon and not some cadaver tendon, because that would have been an option if I didn't have it. But let me just take this bracelet off. So the tendon was taken from this scar. Oh, can you see that? It's so bright. From this scar, it was freed up around this scar, and then the end of it is at the end of this scar. That's the length of tendon that was taken. Take the donor tendon. So that chunk of tendon was taken out of here, because it's not really needed. Your arm works fine without it. It was attached at the tip of the finger, the tendon, fed through my new scar sheath. Thank you, scar. And then attached down here somewhere to be able to work. What I didn't realize, and get your barf buckets ready because this is disgusting, is that in order to attach the tendon here and keep it from just sliding down, he put the tendon in there, fed it through, and the way he kept it, the way you keep it here, give it some tension so that it does what it's supposed to do, is a suture. I still get sweaty when I think about it. A suture was fed through my fingernail. Yep. Down through the tip of the new tendon, back up through the fingernail, and a button. Oh yeah, like a button like on your shirt. It was crazy. It was like a plastic button. Suture was tied to the outside of that button, so I had a button on my fingernail. Let's just take a moment. I still get the chills when I think about it. So I had this button attaching the tendon to this tip of the finger and attaching it down here. I'm sure it was just sutured in. Months and months of therapy again, and a whole lot of being nervous and almost throwing up, and don't touch the button. And I had a dressing that was kept over it and changed regularly at therapy. But when that dressing ever came off, I had such anxiety of catching the button on something, or someone touching it or knocking it or getting caught under it. I would have legit nightmares at night. I would have bad dreams that someone flicked my button. That sounds gross. Sorry. Someone touched my finger button and it wasn't a good feeling. And I was so happy but so scared the day that the button was coming off. I just, blah. Ugh, it was so gross. So the button came off, thank God. And it took a couple months for the two button holes to grow up off my fingernail. And I have a wonky fingernail to this day. That fingernail will always grow funny because it's scarred underneath, but whatever. So that probably was in 2010 or 11 that finally happened. 2010 or 11, I don't really remember. So therapy. So once the final wound healing therapy was done was when we started the intensive strength training therapy, squeeze this thing. I was squeezing tension balls and those hand squeezy things, and I mean, they had me squeezing and yanking and pulling everything. And I had a TENS unit. If you don't know what that is, it's like a little machine with electrodes that you can put on certain muscles to cause contractions. So I had the TENS unit pads were placed right over whatever should cause this to do this. I never got that to do that. What I have now is better than anything I ever had. I just could never get that finger to move. Just never would it move. In all of my therapy, months and months and months of therapy, just would never move. So fast forward, and now we're out of options. The healing is completed. It's been months and months and months. The healing is completed. There's nothing more we can do. Actually, there was. I said, is your bag of tricks empty? There's nothing more you can do. And he said, well, the last thing we could consider is amputation. If that finger is really bothersome, we could consider amputation. And I was like, you know what? If that would get me back to work, I would do that. Let's do it. But he talked me out of it because if you think about it, so what I do for work involves gloves. Anything in the medical profession involves gloves. I have to put gloves on. And I would frequently have to put gloves on in a sterile fashion. And they don't make gloves with 4 fingers. If they do make any kind of specialty amputee medical worker gloves, I'm sure no company would want to pay for them for me. Especially not the company I worked for at the time. So he talked me out of it. He said, you know what, amputation is going to get rid of that finger. You won't have that finger anymore. And it wouldn't just be amputating this. It would be amputating all the way down into the hand bone. So I would just have like a skinny hand with just 3 fingers. I'm not vain. I didn't care if that would get me back function. Because the thing about the fist, the thing about your fingers is that if one is not working, I mean, you would think your ring finger is kind of weak anyway, but if one is not working towards this, you're never going to get this. If one is not playing, you can't do this. So no matter how hard you try, if one finger doesn't work, you cannot get a tight fist. You cannot get a good grip. So that was the problem, was my dominant hand had no grip. Was part of the problem. So he talked me out of it, and he said, even without that how are you going to put gloves on? How are you going to do your job? So I was like, ugh, you're right. What do I do? And he's like, just keep trying to strengthen it. Just keep trying. If you want to get that function back, you just got to keep working it. So this was obviously a case where someone else was paying for all this treatment, and it kind of got to the point where they didn't want to pay for it anymore because there was no more predicted positive outcome. Like nothing could be improved by further formal therapy. So I was released off of that. So I figured, well, I'll just hit up my company and see what I can do for another kind of job, but still stay with the same company and hope to maybe get back to it someday. So I worked that out, and I was given a job in a different capacity that wasn't horrible and left room for me to be able to transition back into the job that I loved so much. So I did that. It was like such a happy day. I remember the day I went back to work, I had counted the number of days it had been. It was like 1,500 something, whatever days. It was crazy. So I left work on 9/5/2007 was the day the accident happened. I went back to work on 11/12/2012. That's a long ass time. That was 5 years. And I remember thinking when I first went in to have that original procedure done, I remember thinking, oh, a few weeks, few months, I'll be back. 5 years. It was like 5 years and 2 months, 3 months, something like that. That was a hell of a ride. It was basically all of my daughter's 8th grade and high school. That's what it was. I went back to work like 3 months after she left for college. A waste of time, but I made good use of my time. I did a ton of therapy. You know, the good thing is I got to see every one of her middle school and high school softball games. I got to go to them all, even on the times when I couldn't drive because of this. My parents go to all of them, so they would grab me and take me to the game. So that was one good thing. That was probably the only good thing that came out of it, is I got to be home, you know, with my daughter after school and see her softball games. I try to always look at the good in things. So then I went back to work in this different capacity, it was in a different location, actually. Same company, different location. It was a little bit further away, but I was coming back to more money. I don't know how that happened. I guess 5 years, there was bound to be increases. So I went back to more money. And this job went okay. It was a little bit of a different kind of thing because I was used to doing one thing for so long, and now I had to see the other side of it, which was fine. And I did gradually get to transition back now and then to doing some of the old things I had been doing. So that was fun. And then by the time I was done, by the end of my time with that company, I was back doing that all the time. So it was the best therapy. As good as my therapist was, I had multiple therapists at the therapy place I went to. As good as my therapists all were, the best therapy was just getting back to work and doing things with my hands every day. Even if it was just like using a stapler or like a pair of scissors or just writing things with a pen or a whole lot of typing. You know, even though this finger wouldn't cooperate, I taught myself how to type with the other fingers, and just that one just didn't play. Yep, the best therapy was just getting back to a job, working 8 hours a day, just using my hands, doing different things. Best therapy, because I ended up going to another job with another company, and I'm doing something even better than what I was doing before. And like I said, I'm sorry to be so vague, but I just don't want to give too much away. But just suffice it to say that sometimes things happen for a reason. I cut my hand, and the end result is I have a job that I actually like better, and I never thought that would be possible. So it is. Things happen for a reason, I guess. But so that was my journey of my little accident with my hand. So the end result is when I was finished therapy, this finger would not bend. You can see my pinky did develop a little bit of a contracture, and that is when, due to lack of use, your my tendons and muscles in this finger have kind of atrophied, because these two fingers by nature want to go together. And if this one really isn't doing much, this one also is not going to do much. So at rest, my pinky's in a contracture. Nothing I can do about it. I exercise my hands all the time. Back to work every day using my hands just plenty, but at rest I do have a pinky contracture. These two fingers are completely normal. This finger, even though it was kind of stuck that way, you saw me do it a couple times, I can, if I think about it hard, ooh, there it goes. I can bring it down. Now that's not a great fist. That is not a tight, great fist, because this is just doing that. But look at it. I mean, it went from just staying up straight all the time to, see if I can do it again. It's really hard to do, like, purposely. When I'm just, there it goes. Like, I can pick this up, right? Can I grip it? Yep. So it's hard. It's like, it like takes thought and it takes purpose. If I just pick it up, I have to like, there it goes. So it's just like a little bit of a delay thing. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's hard. Let's see. Can I grip this? So there's that. Not really. Can I grip my phone? Oh, it's hard. There it goes. Oh. So anyway, oops, I just shut my phone off. So that's my story. Could certainly have ended worse. Could probably have ended better, but it is what it is, and I make do every day. There are very few things at this point that I can't do. I mean, I went from not being able to drive a car, not being able to hold a pen, you know, I couldn't do anything, could do nothing with this hand, because when you have that drastic of a change, your hand just is like, blah, it doesn't know what to do. So I figured it out, and it's all good. I can put my earrings in. I can put my makeup on. I mean, I couldn't even put my contacts in the beginning. It was so bad. I went from not being able to do anything because of this hand just being so foreign. My brain saying, "What are you now? What are you doing, hand? Nothing. You're not the hand we knew." To learning how to do everything left-handed. I would pop my contacts in left-handed. I would learn how to write my name left-handed. Doing everything left-handed, to gradually figuring out how to do things right-handed. I could hold a pen. I could cut with scissors. There was a time when I couldn't even cut with scissors. So that's my story about my hand and why it looks funny sometimes. So too bad it wasn't this finger, huh? Because that would have been a lot more fun. A lot more. That would have been probably a little bit more fun. Oh well. One sad thing about it is, for my first wedding anniversary, my husband had bought me a ring, a beautiful, beautiful sapphire ring. It actually looked a lot like my wedding ring, but it just had a sapphire in it instead. Sapphire, because that was the month we got married, was September. And when this happened, I was no longer allowed to wear jewelry. So no more with the ring, and I ended up losing it. I took it off and put it somewhere, and I've never found it since. Who knows where it ended up. Once in a while I do, like you saw, I sneak a loose bracelet on my hand, but nothing tight or constrictive here because of the scar and the need for this to all flow nicely, and certainly no rings ever on this hand, but could always be worse. I still have my fingers and I still have my health. Could always be worse. So that's my story. Thanks for watching, and if you have any other questions about any of the process of how that happened, go ahead and hit me up. So thanks for watching. Bye.